Nemo, I got a quick question for you. How do you make those custom
You cut out.
name? How do you make those custom letters in your name?
You hold down the letter in the letter or the keyboard box, and it'll give you options.
I wonder what options I have.
They're actually accents. I actually need those. It's part of my name. It's not to look cool.
But I just want them. I can be Matt Bruce.
I think we should all start using them.
Yeah, Matt Bruce, right? And I can make people call me that.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that works.
Now we all know Brute's internal sense of humor. We're just going to wait a few more minutes for some participants to join, and then we'll get started.
Great.
$43 people already in.
That's pretty good.
Rob, did you want me to unmute or mute?
Just mute yourself, Trav.
Okay.
Matt,
Yeah, you can be Lauren. Like, does Ralph Lauren have an accent for Lauren?
Dude, Ralph Lauren is Jewish. It's not even his real name.
I am not Jewish.
That's
But
the
does-
thing, Matt.
Does
Maybe you just
Lauren have an accent on it? Because you
need
would
a
think it
stage
would.
name, Matt. That's really what you need.
Ralph Lauren's last name
on my
is
team.
it's
He
Ralph
knows-
Bullshits.
Cool. Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started while people continue to join. Welcome to our first live Q&A with our Brute Strength team, as well as Brent. Welcome, Brent. We're just going to do a quick introduction. Coaches, when we introduce you or when I introduce you, please just wave your hand and say hello. First of all, we'll start with Matt Bruce, head of Olympic weightlifting. Adrian Conway, head coach of Games Prep Compete and Masters athlete. Nick Fowler, director of strength and conditioning. Dr. Sean, director of injury management. Derek Schultz, Brute Gymnastics coach. Nemo, head coach of Sink or Swim. And Lauren, mental performance coach. And of course, Brent Fikowski, our CrossFit Games athletes. Perfect. For everybody that has joined, please feel free to add your Q&As into the chat on the bottom, and we will start asking questions. So first question, we will go to Lauren. What's the best book you have ever read?
Ooh, best book I've ever read. Well, actually, I'm reading a really good book right now. I have it right next to me. The Slight Edge. Really great book. It's by Jeff Olson. I really encourage everybody out there to read that. But I think if I had to pick one of the best books I've ever read, Nick Fowler actually gave me this book. Super easy read. It's called Mastery by George Leonard. A lot of good stuff in there. So yeah, that's where I would start. I would start with Mastery or The Slight Edge.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good question.
Adrian, we have a question. How do you keep from losing your strength gains during the current situation?
Ooh, that's a good one. It could go a lot of directions, so I'll try to be pretty concise. You know, when it comes to clearly resources, most of us are limited. So depending on your specific situation, one thing that I would encourage you to consider is the value in plyometric training. So a lot of people underutilize explosive type training, and that could be upper body or lower body, but that really means just jumping around. So there are many different forms, but one of the big things that we understand is that we can hold on to raw strength gains for weeks at a time, potentially even a little bit longer than that. And same with like long, slow cardio respiratory type gains. However, that energy system that's in between, like the one that involves skill and explosive power, and specifically it caters to our central nervous system, that can go away very quickly. So when it comes to developing strength and maintaining strength through those aspects, think about jumping, squat jumps, tuck jumps, lunge jumps, and not just doing so to jump, but to do so explosively. So every repetition should almost be maximal effort. Those can be tremendous value. And then also in the form of gymnastics, I would encourage you to consider body weight strength through isometrics. So a lot of different holds, planche progressions, holding the bottom of a push-up, the top of a push-up, get in a funky position that you might have never dreamed of before. And the goal would be to think about holding that position isometrically for a specific amount of time and potentially building out progressions through that during this time of quarantine.
Perfect. Thank you, Adrian. For Brent, we have a question. Do you tend to self-regulate on your own training, or do you stick to the program as written?
Oh, it's kind of a loaded question that could have a really long answer. As much as I can, I try to stick to the program, but I think in this sport, so let's say, for example, you're in football and you're a lineman, you can be a foot soldier and be really valuable and not really have to think too much. I think in this sport, you have to be very aware of your body and aware of how you're feeling and learn how to adapt. And so with that in mind, I try to stick to the program as best I can. And I think I try to understand the why behind what Nick Fowler, for example, is giving me. So if he's giving me, 5x5 back squat, I kind of want to know, okay, like, is this supposed to be really hard? Is it supposed to be explosive? And if he gives me a recommended percentage, I might deviate from that percentage to hit the why. And so that could be with anything. And so if I'm feeling really, really good, or if I'm feeling kind of crap and really tired, then what's written, I might have to change to still kind of get the desired stimulus for that day. So I try as much as I can to stick to it, but I'm not too hard on myself when I feel like I need to change it. And I just make sure I communicate with my coach why I'm changing it. And I never try to change anything just because, oh, that looks hard. It's always for a good reason.
Perfect. Thank you. Nick Fowler, I have one question for you. What can help athletes stay on track for competition during this pandemic when they have limited equipment, a toddler, limited funding, and limited access to quality food?
Yeah, that's kind of what the big question is, right? Like when we're lacking equipment, what can we do? And the truth of the matter is that a lot of people are going to be in the same boat. And so I think that, one, making sure that you understand your priorities and your weaknesses, and that you have a plan to attack them. And here's the thing is, I think you can develop a plan with a whole bunch of different tools, right? So like, if you can only do goblet squats, then that's the tool you're using versus like a barbell for back squats. So I think given the equipment that you have, just make sure that you keep addressing the priorities that are going to get you closer to competition day. And then here, and I kind of mentioned that everybody's in the same boat. And this is the thing, is that everyone's going to be training a little bit more body weight, right? A little bit more speed strength, a little bit lighter plyometric based, maybe even aerobic, style training in the months to come. And so these are the athletes that are going to show up on the floor. So just because you don't have a barbell, just because you don't have the equipment, don't let that get in your head saying, oh, I'm going to be behind everybody else, because everybody's in the same boat. As far as the toddler and kids and budgets and things like that, it's a resource. And unfortunately, I think Costco, things like this are great. Obviously, in the time that we're in right now, it's difficult maybe to go out, depending on where you live. But it's tough times. I don't know if I have an answer around a toddler. I think I look back to my garage time and training and with my kids, and I think bringing your kids into what you're doing is the best thing you can do, right? Have them count reps, right? Have them with a stopwatch and start timing you and kind of make it a family thing versus trying to pull away. It's tough, I get it, but that's what I would recommend.
Perfect, thank you, Nick. Derek, we have a gymnastics question for you. what should athletes do in regards to gymnastics if they don't have a traditional pull-up bar or access to rings or a rig?
That's a tough one. I've been racking my brain the last 2 months with our alternate programming too, specifically with pulling strength. The best recommendation I think I can give is you have to be creative. Find something around the house where you can at least, if it's not a full range of motion hanging, maybe the back of your tailgate where you can get into a horizontal position and do some type of modified ring row or a modified pull-up. I know at my house specifically, I have a box and I have dip bars. So I put my feet on the box and hang from the dip bar and do pull-ups. And there's the movements, like the ring muscle ups and bar muscle ups. What I recommend is breaking down the components of those movements. If you can find something stationary to do dips on, do dips. If you can, like I said, do some type of modified pulling, I recommend breaking those down. So if a program calls for, let's say, 30, 40 ring muscle ups, break down the muscle up into sets of dips, pull-ups, push-ups, and use your discretion. If it seems like it's, you need to know your limits, I guess, to modify the programming to fit the rest of your all-around programming. So that's it. Just be creative. Find things that you can use around the house.
Perfect. Thank you, Derek. Dr. Sean, I have a question for you. What are some tips for shoulder and hip health for pre and post training with only a band?
Good question. That depends on what the training looks like. So pre and post training tips for shoulder and hip health. The first thing I would say is this. Let's break it into two different categories. Let's say that you're someone who's training with no equipment at all. The pre and post that you can use the band for is to go into end ranges of the joint and make small manipulations while you're there. So for example, bringing your shoulder all the way up to here, all the way back, and then your rotations in and out can prime the joint almost like a bastardized kin stretch would with external load. And that would get you ready for work. After the exercise, I think that the band work would just be to reintroduce blood flow. If you have equipment, then I think it all stays the same as what bands are good for in non-quarantine times, which is pre-workout muscle activation, getting things ready to fire in somewhat the same pattern that they'd be firing in when they're under load. Getting your body ready for resistance, loading your joints into compression and distraction in ways that you can't do without external load. The one thing I want to keep everybody acutely aware of is that something that's very different about bands than actual weight is that bands are going to be heaviest in end range, where weight is going to be essentially most stable in end range. What I mean by that is if you're starting to press a band, it is the lightest here and the heaviest here. Where if you're pressing a dumbbell, it's the heaviest here and the lightest here. People can typically hold the dumbbell up overhead longer than they can over here. So I guess that's the best answer I can provide with bands. Frankly, they wouldn't be the thing that I would use to improve hip and shoulder health before and after workouts.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Matt Bruce, I have a question for you. As a coach, when your athlete feels like they know more than you do or refuse to listen, how do you manage that?
I think, yeah, like we keep saying, that's a pretty loaded question. So that goes down ultimately to the relationship that you have with that athlete. That has to begin at the very forefront. And if these athletes are having these doubts, then you didn't build the trust from the beginning. This is something that has to be nurtured within the athlete over time. So therefore, there is no quick answer. the answer is to sit down with that athlete and find out what's the root problem of them not having that trust or wanting to, do something different. And have open and honest conversations with those athletes instead of just acting as a coach, acting like you know it all and you have the easy fix and just to go to the root of the problem, find out why there is this distrust, and solve it from there. But hopefully a good coach would be able to nip that in the butt from the beginning of their training.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Question for Coach Adrian. Except for the additional COVID section in our programming in the app, did the main programming for games prep, has it changed or been adjusted?
A direct answer to that is really no. We've done our very best to continue on our traditional schedule. Of course, the big thing that we've got to consider when it comes to preparation is the changes in sanctionals. But from a general perspective, we've been able to hold on to the consistency of the program. And the reason is because a lot of our athletes were competing at different times anyways. We had athletes that would step off of the live program and into sanctionals prep periodically throughout the year. So we're able to maintain a consistent schedule in the live group via compete, games prep, and masters. And then of course, all the one-on-one athletes have their own coaches that are able to dictate exactly what they need to be focused on and when. So that created a bit of, I'm sure, an adaptation and a quick adjustment period for a lot of those individual coaches. But for the most part, our program has remained the same. And then, of course, we've tried to add in the extras that provide value for people that are trapped at home with very little to no equipment.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Brent, sorry, we just read that one. Give me 1 second. Brent, what was your favorite and least favorite event of the games last year?
Last year, well, I didn't do too many, so there were 6. I enjoyed doing the sled push bar muscle up workout. That was probably the event I enjoyed the most. You know, obviously afterwards there was the whole like, oh, was my sled the same as everyone else's and blah blah blah. But the actual in workout experience, I had a really good experience in that one. Least, let me think. I don't really know. I mean, the other ones were all kind of the same. Like none of them were really unenjoyable, but none of them stick out as being like a bad experience, so to speak. I mean, leaving the floor on Mary, knowing I probably got cut wasn't a great feeling, but I wasn't like super bummed about it. And then obviously like falling on my face on the handstand walk wasn't ideal, but at the same time it was just that, yeah. So I suppose probably that took a little bit of time to kind of like, you know, pull my head out and just, you know, refocus. So I'd say, I guess maybe that, but the event itself, that was a fun event. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's probably maybe not the answer they wanted, but yeah, that's the answer they got.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Coach Nemo, I started swimming. I'm not good at it, but I feel like the biggest issue for me is the breathing pattern. I tend to get out of the rhythm very quickly. How can I work on that?
Okay, so there's 2 parts to that question. So the person asked about breathing pattern and stroke or rhythm, which is really stroke rhythm. So let's talk about breathing pattern first. So if you're having trouble and you're losing that breathing pattern, it could be, for beginners, what we usually see is they've selected a breathing pattern that they can't sustain. So she's asking about, okay, I can't maintain that breathing pattern. It could be the selection. Typically with beginners, coaches will give the suggestion to do breathing every 3 strokes because it's a bilateral breathing pattern. So you're working both sides. In competition, you can see both sides. And in open water, you can do the same, right? So for navigating through open water. However, with beginners, I suggest that you actually pull back and breathe every 2. And the way that you can continue to work bilateral breathing in that way is 1 length, you'll breathe to your right side, and 1 length, you'll breathe to your left side. And that way you get to work on breathing a little bit more. And you don't feel as gassed because you're breathing more often. In terms of losing rhythm, so with stroke rhythm, it typically is a case of when you are breathing. So when you see a good athlete swim or a good swimmer swim, you see a rhythm that flows and there's very little disruption through that flow. With beginners, what happens is they take the breath at the wrong part of the stroke. And there's one really good point where you can breathe where it doesn't disturb the stroke continuity. And that's when we're mostly rotated. So when the recovery arm is entering into the water and the pulling arm is finishing the stroke, you're going to be rotated there and you don't actually have to move your head very much and the stroke continues to flow. So if her question is about continuing that flow, it's breathing right when you're up on your side versus trying to catch your breath too early. That's where we usually see with beginner level swimmers where they break that continuity and they might be losing that rhythm. So that's the two answers.
Perfect, thank you. Matt Bruce, I always have trouble standing up out of a clean due to weak leg strength. What are the things I can incorporate to help get my leg strength up?
Great question. We get this a lot. So if you look online, there's a ton of squat programs, right? There's one from my coach. Yeah, they're very numerous. So, but the question becomes, which one of these programs are the best? And then how do you even incorporate this into your actual training? My biggest suggestion would be you always hear the term squat every day, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to do a front squat or a back squat every day. Because if you got to think, if you're doing front squats one day a week, back squats one day a week, but if you're doing heavy cleans another day, or possibly heavy step ups, or even other leg movements that you don't even consider a squat, these are still squatting exercises that could be pretty heavy loaded. You know, a heavy squat clean could possibly be, 80% of your best front squat, right? So you're still getting work there. So my biggest suggestion would be to quote unquote squat every day, but be careful with what that term squatting every day means, right? Squatting every day does not necessarily mean front heavy clean, step ups, Bulgarian split squats. There's many different options for these squats, and be careful with how you load them so that the percentages are always undulating in fashion so that you're giving your body time to rest in between the different types of exercises.
Perfect, thank you very much. Lauren, with so much uncertainty regarding the future during this pandemic, what are the strategies to live in the moment instead of continuously planning for the future?
Yeah, great question. I think this is something, at least with a lot of my clients and athletes and friends and family members, I think a lot of us are going through this current situation right now, right? Like, when is the end date and how long is it going to be like this? And I think that we really just have to, one big thing that I recommend and I'm doing myself, right, is I'm reframing the situation. So, and reframing basically is changing your perspective, changing your, how you're thinking of the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So instead of really thinking about it as, for example, when is this going to be over and why is everything taken away from me and when will I get my gym back? Really try to reframe it and think of it as an opportunity. Okay, so I have an opportunity. I know Matt Bruce said this on a phone call last week. I have an opportunity to walk with my wife and, get outside more with my family. I have an opportunity to, be with my family more and get back into reading or get back into stretching and whatnot. So, and in regards to being actually present, I would start with focusing on building the skill of what it means for you to reframe thoughts in your head and how you see your day. I know for me, that really helps me when I wake up in the morning, instead of saying, for example, well, I can't do my training because my equipment's been taken away from me. Now it's, hey, I get to be creative with how I can do my best to fill my training up, to, do all the things that I actually can do. So that's one thing, right? Focus on reframing. And another thing that a lot of my clients have been finding success with is, one thing to help them be really present in the moment is to focus on filling your day with small little ounces of joy. So there's a big misunderstanding between what joy is versus what happiness is. And all of us want to be happy, right? None of us want to be sad. None of us want to be angry. None of us want to have anxiety or feel depressed or whatever it might be. But when you feel joy, right, it's something that physiologically changes your body. You smile, you laugh, you jump up and down, things happen. And there's no doubt in your mind that you're actually full of joy. So for every individual person, joy is going to come. There's going to be different triggers. Some people, it might be a cute little YouTube video of a dog, for example. Like, who doesn't like to see that, right? Other people, one of my clients mentioned the other day that buying a fresh bouquet of flowers and fresh herbs to cook with actually increased the joy that she felt throughout her day. She was able to go into her training sessions happier, knowing that there was just a small little bouquet of flowers in her kitchen that she saw before she went outside. So in regards to being present, I think each of us are a little bit different in how we are going to go about that. But I would focus on reframing, changing your perspective, right, of what the pandemic is actually providing you, the opportunities actually is giving you instead of taking away. And then identify your personal triggers so you can fill your day up with more snippets of joy. So that's where I would start.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Fowler, I have a pretty sweet home gym set up, so working out and continuing as good as always. However, due to being isolated, I have decreased my calories, but have actually been gaining weight. According to my scale, the gain isn't muscle. Any ideas of what is going on, and is there a way to rectify this, or is there a way how to rectify this?
Man, there's so many things here. The first thing that I think of automatically is your scale accurate? Like, has something changed? Either the time of day that you're weighing yourself, something like that. I mean, this is paired. You're asking a training question, but it might be a little bit deeper. It might be a nutrition question. It might be a lifestyle question. I honestly, like, let's assume, and there's a lot of assumptions here, but let's assume that that everything is accurate, and it could just be the increase in stress. That's another thing that, in my experience, like talking with so many people during these times, that even though training might not have changed, our physiological state is impacted by the stresses in our life, right? And so that could be having a direct effect on, the increased body weight and what you're experiencing. Honestly, I would suggest reaching out to us and then trying to find 20, 30 minutes where we can really dissect the situation. We have coaches that'd be happy to get on a 30-minute call and kind of talk about this in depth. And I think that's what this really needs. But my gut says there's probably some stress, underlying stuff that's, just creating the physical change in there. But like I said, contact, reach out, and definitely sit down and kind of dissect what's going on, come up with some solutions, things like that. I wish I had a better answer. But I think the biggest thing that I've noticed during this time is that, we are not giving enough credit to the impact on our psyche, emotional state that this situation is happening, right? And so I think even though maybe training hasn't changed, our ability to recover has been really, really impacted. And so that's just something to kind of look at. Maybe I recommend like a journal every day, just keeping track of what's going on, to give you that kind of objective perspective, if that makes sense, because it's hard when you're all wrapped up into it to have that perspective. So having an outside perspective, someone to kind of help you figure out what's going on, might be the best thing.
Perfect. Thank you. Dr. Sean, my left side seems to always be getting injured. Chiro massage helped 2 days at most, but my left knee, shoulder, wrist, literally everything on my left side starts to hurt again. Any ideas?
Yeah, so it's been really quiet over here until this question came up, and now I got a dog who's drinking her bowl of water right next to me. So I hope that's not interrupting the sound. But I saw this question pop up, and my answer is similar to Nick's, in that it would be irresponsible for me to give you a specific answer as to what is causing that. without further investigation, without assessment, without conversation. What I would tell you, Mark, is the first thing to consider is the two things that you described as being what you're trying to use to get yourself out of pain are passive. And what that means is someone else is doing them to or for you. So you have a chiropractor manipulating you, you have a massage therapist trying to move some soft tissue around, some blood flow, some fluid, whatever it might be. And if you're on this Q&A, the likelihood is between those appointments and the 2 days later, you're doing some kind of exercise, whether it's high intensity or going for a 30-minute walk. You're probably not a very passive person. And that means it might require an active solution. It likely requires some kind of strengthening, some kind of lengthening, but either way, those are going to come from you actively being a part of your solution, not laying on somebody else's table and letting them do it for you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Coach Adrian, training at home.
Rob, can I add one more thing?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I want everyone who's listening to know, like I consult with Brute, right? I don't have an at Brute Strength email. But if you have a problem that you're asking, that like the one that was just asked to Nick, or any of the questions that you're asking that really would require a coach, I strongly recommend you guys reach out to them and go further than just this quick Q&A, because the opportunity to be helped is limited by your opportunity to execute the advice that you get in a quick snippet answer. And I know Brute, the only company that we refer clients to at Active Life is Brute for one-on-one coaching. So reach out to them, give them the opportunity to help you, whether it's working together one-on-one or just giving you the tools to help yourself.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Coach Adrian, training at home turned out to be using light to medium load with mid to high reps to maintain strength, except tempo negatives, pausing movements. Do you have anything else to suggest?
This is very similar to the question that we had earlier, but honestly, I think you have some great things in mind. So whoever the participant is that's asking such a question, I mean, the one of the biggest dangers here in this current state of quarantine, where everyone's chasing all of these workouts with hundreds and thousands of repetitions each one, is that we're going to be breaking our body down. It's not the best way to just function at super speeds and very dynamic for hundreds of air squats per week and push-ups and burpees and double unders, right? Like those are things that a lot of people are doing in ridiculous amounts of volume now. So the simple fact that you listed eccentrics, pauses, isometrics, like those are all really good sign, not just for your awareness, but also for your joints, your connective tissue. Like they will thank you for that, because a lot of people might be coming out of here with some hot knees and hot shoulders and need to seriously go visit Dr. Sean. So, the point is that I think you've got some great things in mind. And to add to that, like I mentioned before, plyometrics again are probably one of the most overlooked aspects that you can use to contribute. And sprinting, honestly, these are all things that I've done previously throughout my childhood and performing in athletics outside of the sport of CrossFit, and it helped create a broad base of athleticism for me, as well as raw strength, and that's in the absence of any load. So a squat jump, a vertical jump, a tuck jump, a 10-yard sprint, find a hill and sprint that hill for 20 seconds as fast and as high as you can. And shuttle sprints, things that are short. Of course, they often do feel a little bit uncomfortable, and they're outside of the scope of what we would do in a traditional CrossFit setting, but can be tremendous for athletic development, burning fat, and building, not just even sustaining lean body tissue. So consider those things.
Thank you, Coach Adrian. Nemo, due to the pandemic, most of us don't have access to a pool. What type of work can be done not to lose the progress we've gained?
All right. So yeah, this question comes up a lot because pretty much everyone has no pool access now. And unless you have a endless pool in your backyard or a pool that's at a good distance, you're doing all your stuff indoors. So what I suggest is continue to improve your GPP at this time. Try not to replicate swimming on land. You can do specific exercises for swimming. So pull-ups and stuff like that. If you have a pull-up bar, push-ups, all these things will help once you get back into the pool. But in terms of trying to replicate swimming on land, it's a bad idea. Hydrodynamics is a complex thing. So again, this is the time to work on your GPP. If you had any swimming prior to this, yeah, when you come back into the pool, you'll be a little bit rusty, but that's more of a water feel thing. So your best bet is to be as fit as possible. And again, the best thing to do right now is do CrossFit. Find a good coach that knows your profile. I think swimming sometimes gets put into this category of like, you only need to do aerobic work. No, work strength, speed, endurance, coordination, flexibility. And if you have a good coach that can tell you where your weaknesses are, they'll substitute the right thing in this time on land so that when you get back into the pool, you're as fit as possible.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Nick Fowler, I know you and I have talked about this. So a question from somebody, what do you think of the Wim Hof breathing technique? Do you think it could be helpful to any part of the training or recovery?
Yeah, honestly, I think it depends on who you are, right? So I love Wim Hof. I think that Wim Hof is fantastic. I think so there's kind of a craze going on in terms of like nose only breathing training and things like that, which kind of ties in a little bit to Wim Hof. And with like nose only breathing, I would just be a little cautious because it can shut down the CO2 drive. And not to go too in depth, but long story short, your CO2 drive is what kind of pings you to breathe. And so if you start shutting that down, it could interrupt the mechanical breathing skill and things like that. And so just kind of be aware with that. Now, Wim Hof, that's more of like I would call it like a mindful breathing practice. And if you want to add in cold, great. Now, the two benefits are fantastic, right? So you have the cold, which is great for recovery, circulation, nervous system. There's just so many, so much research out there. You could probably Google it and find out for yourself. Something that you guys, especially with more time on your hands, being at home, where you're not looking at that 20-minute drive to the gym, spend 20 minutes, either contrast showers, which is my favorite, or, a cold bath, something like that. In terms of Wim Hof stuff, I think it's great. I think it's one of the biggest advantages to Wim Hof that I find isn't actually physiological, right? So people are I think naturally we're very focused on like what's going to get me fitter, faster, and stronger. And I think a big component that we miss is one of the biggest influences to get you fitter, faster, and stronger is your ability to recover. So anything that you can do to get you present, right, and just breathing in the moment that stimulates a little bit of a parasympathetic state is going to be a good thing. And I think that's where Wim Hof really comes in. So if you're not familiar with Wim Hof, Google it, give it a shot. You can add it to your routine. I think routine right now is king. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Brent, if you feel unmotivated to train, how do you differentiate, whether that is because you are tired or your body needs to rest? Is it because you're just being lazy, or do you need to suck it up and train?
That's a good question. And, like a good question has not an easy answer. Usually what I do is I guess here's the easy answer is I go to the gym still, I warm up, and I get started on the first piece. I usually try and complete that first piece. And if by the end of that first piece, I still really don't want to be there, then usually I call it quits. So that's usually my litmus test. So if I'm kind of like, I don't want to go, I'm like, Brent, go warm up, start training. And usually like 9 times out of 10, once you start training, you get through that first piece, you're like, oh, I feel better like this. I'm glad I'm here. Then I get going. But if by that first piece or that second piece, I'm still like, man, I don't want to be here, I'm feeling really distracted and, emotional and blah, blah, blah. Then it's like, you need to call it quits. You need to take the session off, and it's a good decision to take it off because you need a break. So that's probably, I think, an actionable answer. And that's usually what I recommend for people. So, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Matt Bruce, what one exercise CrossFit athletes are not incorporating enough into their programming?
Okay, so I'm going to take this from a Olympic weightlifting standpoint, since that's what I coach. So a lot of times, especially with Olympic weightlifters, we see Olympic weightlifters, all the beauty of their snatches and cleans and jerks. This is what they post onto Instagram, and everybody gets excited to see. But what most people do not see in their training is the amount of that. So to be more specific, snatch grip and clean grip pulls, and doing these pulls from different positions, especially from positions that they're possibly weak in. When I say that, maybe they're weak when they pass the knee, or struggle with the scooping of the pull, which is from the knee to the hip. For every snatch or clean I've ever done in my life, I've done at least that many reps in pulls above 85% of my max. So most people ask me, how can I get better at snatches or cleans? And the first question I always ask them is, how often are they pulling? And majority of those people say, oh, I don't do any pulls at all. So that would be my first step, is if you can pull correctly at 100, 105%, 110% of your max snatch or max clean, you can control that movement so much easier than, say, in an actual snatch or a clean. And then therefore you're building with good technique and strength, so that when it comes time to snatch or clean, your body takes over and knows exactly what to do without thinking. And that only comes through repetition and good repetitions. And with a pull, a snatch grip or clean grip pull, you can control those repetitions at heavy weights.
Perfect, thank you. Coach Adrian, I am new to the program. What is the goal of the Brutal Friday workouts when you're programming them? Is it to overload one specific area or exercise, grip, chest, double unders? I notice it's not usually strength specific or barbell cycling, but some rather odd pairing. What is the overall goal when you're programming these? Also, why is there not more barbell cycling programming throughout the program?
Great question. So first of all, the purpose of Brutal Fridays is to primarily test and retest. So we use it as an aspect to create community. It's one of those pieces where we look at our programming as community oriented and group based, but it's also very individually constructed, which means there's segments throughout the week where you get an opportunity to choose your own. It's like an a la carte style of training, where if you are weak in the snatch or weak in the clean or weak in the ring muscle up or weak in the bar muscle up, you might be diverging your training to a different path than much of the rest of the group. So Fridays is kind of that opportunity for us to unify as a unit and really get to test something that aligns a lot like something that I would dream up as a qualifier style workout or a sanctional style workout, but is also achievable for many of the different levels that we have within our community. In regards to why they're a little less traditional, it's simply for the variance standpoint. It's me looking back on the week and understanding that we have tremendous amounts of barbell cycling that do take place on Mondays and Wednesdays that are embedded into the program, and even Fridays as well for people that are in the games prep. And depending on how much programming that you get, those barbell cycling pieces are certainly present. So it's really about taking what we don't focus on too much already and allowing that to be a really high intensity piece throughout the week that people can essentially see from that Monday on and prepare for mentally and say, okay, I'm going to really make sure that I'm recovered for this. I'm going to maybe cater my swimming session on Thursday or cater my gymnastics practice on Thursday so that I can actually hit this piece and challenge myself a lot like they would for an open or a qualifier type opportunity.
Perfect. Thank you, Adrian. Question for Dr. Sean. Any hints or suggestion for self-treatment for golfer's elbow? The pain and discomfort definitely hampers lifting. I'm hoping to find a way to treat it while continuing to work out.
Golfer's elbow. So the first thing I would want to make sure for anybody describing something like this is, let me start over. Let's just talk about tendon health, okay? Because there's a big misconception around tendon health that rest is what you need to do or that compression is what you need to do. And I want to just give you this answer as a general rule for any kind of tendon issue. It's not just for golfer's elbow. If what your symptoms are gets better as you warm up and go from rep to rep to rep to rep to rep, then rest will be one of the worst things that you can do for that joint, for that tendon. If it gets worse from rep to rep to rep, then using it could be one of the worst things that you do. And you want to work with somebody more specifically on how to handle it. The best thing in general for tendon health is time under tension, absent compression. So what that means is, in the case of the elbow, it's going to be really difficult for you to create much compression. I wouldn't worry about it too much. But for golfer's elbow, what you could do is take a small hand weight, put it in your hand, drop your hand off the edge of a table, right? Start with the weight all the way down, all the way up over here, lower it down eccentrically, open up the fingers, and then with your other hand, pull it back up. And if you go online and you Google Drexel University, heavy, slow resistance protocols, Drexel University, heavy, slow resistance protocols. That is one of the best proven methods to improve any tendon degeneration problems that people have. We use it all the time in varying ways for our one-on-one clients at Active Life. And the key is just to make sure that you're using it for the right thing in the right way. So bicep curls might be valuable for you. Wrist flexion, wrist extension might be valuable for you, because you might not be able to determine exactly which tendon is where this problem is coming from. I would recommend doing both and alternating every other day, switching which one you do. But follow the protocols for HSR from Drexel University if you're going to try to self-treat. And I throw air quotes up because we don't treat anybody who works with us. And unlikely that any of you guys are really treating yourself either. It's just a matter of creating a better environment for your body to work. Things to avoid though, avoid scraping that. Do not scrape it. Don't smash it. Don't tie it to a door frame and hang from it. Okay? Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Brent, how do you prepare mentally, mental-wise on the days leading up to a comp? Do you have a routine pre-workout, or when you go home after the day's over and waiting for the next day of comp?
I'd say the biggest thing I do is leading up to a competition. I just make, a really, really big list, and sometimes probably stress myself out a little too much in the days leading up, preparing everything I can. So preparing my food, preparing my bag, figuring out every single detail about the competition, like what the warm-up area is going to be like, what clothing do I need, the layout of the events, and just like making just every single, the temperature, everything I can figure out about the competition I can possibly find out. I have it on a list, and I have a solution for what might go wrong or what hopefully goes right. And so that's kind of my process. So by the time, a day or two before the event starts, I'm just kind of chilling, right? I have the opportunity just to look at my lists and kind of go through them and visualize myself competing, and remind myself that I'm just there to do my best, and I'm not there to win. I'm there to do my best. And if I do my best, I give myself the best opportunity to win. So that's kind of what I do. After each event, or after a day of competition, and then I have another, event or another day of competition after that, I just try to focus on, what's important now. And I try to sort of decompress. I'll often do some journaling, whether that's speaking into a recording or writing down how the day went, just to kind of put it aside. So if it went really, really well, I can just sort of absorb that and enjoy that, write it down, and then move on to what's important next, and not get too wrapped up in oh, I got that world record, and oh, yes, I did it fine. I'm going around. It's you're not done yet. Right. And on the flip side, of course, if, you finish a day or you finish an event on a bad event, at the games when I fell on my face in the handstand walk, I was miserable for a little bit, an hour or two. And then I'm all right, what's next? What's important now? And just sort of started to refocus on you lost some points there. That's okay. What do we need to do to prepare for tomorrow? Let's focus on tomorrow. This is what we learned from that event. This is the stuff we're going to do in training to maybe avoid that kind of mistake again. and then let's just move on. So that's pretty much it. I just kind of get caught up more in the, you know, the process of it, as opposed to any like fancy, you know, like I visualize myself as a lion devouring, you know, like it's nothing crazy like that. So that'd be my suggestion. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. For Lauren, we've got quite a few people asking this question, so we'll lump it into one. This one specifically for France, but we're all experiencing this. We've been in quarantine now for a month, and we are having one more month to go until we have, you know, some government recommendations. Even though I've managed to maintain a good training lifestyle regimen during that first month, this additional month has been mentally hard to accept. I feel like I'm losing motivation / focus because of all the goals or appointments in terms of training and competition have been canceled or frozen. And even with practicing meditation or trying to enjoy the positive, I feel I'm getting tired mentally.
Yeah. First of all, great question. I'm sure a lot of you are feeling that way. I know I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't going through the same thing. And I'm sure a couple of us on the panel are kind of going through the same thing, right? And I think it's just, first, give yourself some grace. It kind of sounds cliche, right? And may make no sense, but give yourself some grace. This is the first time any of us have been going through anything like this. So we shouldn't know what to do. And there's no right or wrong way. But I would say a lot of people that are in your position that are a little, you know, one more month of lockdown. Nick Fowler really taught me a lot about this. But I would get more in tune and connected to your why. I think that this is really important right now. I know some people, right, their why and their reason for training was surrounded around sanctionals or trying to make it to the CrossFit Games or whatever it might be. So take some time to sit down, whether, you know, how Brent just said, writing in a journal or speaking it into your phone or your computer, but really talk yourself through, you know, what is your why right now? Why are you training? Why did you start fitness? Why did you start CrossFit? Why did you originally start with brute strength, right? Because the time is unknown. We don't really know how long this is going to last. And if you're already tired mentally, it could be because you're connected to something that isn't going to happen, like sanctionals and, you know, the games is changed and all of that stuff. So take some time to really get in tune with your why and know that we as people, right, we're meant to evolve over time. So your why, it can change, but just make sure that it is something right now that it's realistic and it's reasonable. Nick Fowler, every once in a while in training sessions, he would stop us in the middle of like a 6-round workout and be like, okay, we're round 4. What is your why for getting through the rest of the workout? What are you deeply connected to? And so that would be where I would start. And I know sometimes it's very difficult. If you need some help on defining your why, like Dr. Sean said, right, reach out to us here. We all have the time to help you come up with that, or maybe to help you discover some things about yourself that you may not know are true. But in regards to being tired mentally, I think there's no quick fix and there's no answer that's going to be a save all answer, right? Because you know you best. And I think that that's something that you really just have to focus on, staying in your own lane. You really have to focus in, okay, if you know you're getting tired mentally, what might be the reason why you're getting so tired mentally? And so look back, you know, use the past, use these last couple of weeks as data to help propel you forward in the right direction moving forward. So if you've been continually doing a certain routine or going into your training sessions thinking of a certain way, if it's not working, be willing to change that. But I think the biggest thing that you can do right now is sit down with yourself, get connected to your why, and maybe reach out for a new goal, whether those are simple daily goals or simple weekly goals that you can physically cross off to just like build that self-confidence. So then you're not always focused on, well, shoot, I'm in this quarantine for another month or another 2 months. You're still accomplishing things. You're still feeling good about yourself and you're staying connected to your why. And I don't know if maybe Nick has something to add to that, because he's kind of he's where I got a lot of this from. So maybe you have something to add to that whole why thing that might be helpful, but that's where I personally would start.
Perfect. Thanks, Lauren.
Mhm.
Derek, for gymnastics requires a lot of core strength. How can I use this time to strengthen my core with minimal equipment?
A lot of core work can be done without equipment. Obviously, you need core strength for a lot of weightlifting, and limited equipment. Does that mean no equipment, or does that mean some dumbbells? Does it mean maybe a barbell with just a few plates? So try to be creative in what equipment you do have. I can say, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of static holds, hollow holds, plank holds, side planks. And if you're part of the programming, then you should be getting plenty of core work on the gymnastics days that require virtually no equipment. We make it a point to program stuff that you can do at home on a regular basis anyway. So even your traditional calisthenic type work, sit-ups, crunches, if you can hang from something, you can do leg lifts, strict knees to chest. Focus on foundational strength. Sometimes the basics are the best, right? So take it back to the simple movements. Think of elementary school PE where they had you do just the regular push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups. And so, yeah, just keep it basic.
Perfect. Thank you. We've had a lot of questions about this one for Nick Fowler. What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting?
Yeah, boy, intermittent fasting, or really any nutritional program, for lack of a better term, has to match the goals. And I think having a goal-centric approach when it comes to any nutritional choices you make is probably the most important thing. I'd say the times that you definitely want to avoid intermittent fasting is if you have any adrenal hormonal concerns at all, and that could show up as something as like trouble sleeping, relaxation. Like if you're a type A, highly tightly wound individual, then I would avoid intermittent fasting if you have performance goals. Right now, health, longevity, there's a lot of good studies out there that intermittent fasting has a lot of benefits to it. And so I think just as a blanket statement, and obviously everybody's different situations, things like that. But if you're looking for performance, you got to fuel that performance, and intermittent fasting is just not going to cut it if you're looking at that top level. For health and longevity, intermittent fasting is a good strategy, is a good tool to use. I would just say become educated in it and start with the basics. So if you're not familiar with counting macros and you're getting on some kind of, I want to say, a strict nutritional regime, and by strict meaning that you're following through with it, you're knowledgeable, you've done it for a while, that's where you want to start. So I just, if you don't have the base, I wouldn't kind of add that intermittent fasting on top of it. But that being said, like I intermittent fast, I usually wake up, cup of coffee, I work for 3 hours, and then I eat. And so, but I don't have, high end performance goals. And so you just really have to look at anytime you start restricting food in any way, you're going to start, there's just a negative outcome when it comes to performance. And so just be aware of that.
Perfect. Thank you. We are out of time. For everybody that's on the call and everybody that's answered questions, we will take these questions offline and send them to the individual coaches for answers and email them out to the panelists. Before we go, I have 2 questions for each panelist. One is, what is your favorite book? And the second one is, what are you most grateful for? Because we are in this moment, because we are quarantined and this stage. So we'll start with Coach Lauren.
Favorite book? Well, I kind of answered this. It was the first question if you weren't on here, but the book I'm reading right now, I'm rereading it and reading it, and it's The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. It's a really good book. It's just talking about simple disciplines that you can implement into your life to reach massive success in whatever way you find success. And what am I most grateful for right now? I'm actually most grateful for my ability to reframe how I use my time. I think leading up to this point, we all wanted to cram everything in our day. There's not enough time in the day. And now I realize that time is so much more than just like a number on the clock. It's what you're doing, you know, with each minute and each hour that you have, in the way that I'm choosing to spend that now. So I think time for me now, it's become so much more of a positive, opportunistic thing rather than like a stressor. So that's how I would answer that.
Perfect. Thank you. Nemo,
What was the second question?
what are you
Didn't
most
catch it.
grateful for right now?
Okay, so I'll answer the book one. Is a tough one. I feel like there's so many books that have impacted me in different ways, so really can't answer one. But in terms of being grateful, what I'm grateful for right now is still being able to work with most of my clients, and that we're finding ways and different ways to engage with them, and that people are willing to step up and change what they're used to continue to progress. So I'm happy for that kind of compliance in a way, and that there's still people that are striving to be better every single day. So yeah.
Thank you. Brent?
Hold on here. Make sure my mic's on. Yep. Favorite book, kind of the same. There's a bunch. I mean, I like some stuff by Joshua Medcalf, like Chop Wood, Carry Water. I haven't read it in a long time, but it was recently Essentialism by Greg McKeown, something like that. And Essentialism. And very, very similar to Lauren Tate regarding this time. March, April, May was going to be a really busy time for me with a trip away from home almost every weekend or every 2 weekends, which I was looking forward to. But now that I've been sort of forced into some simplicity in my routine, I'm really grateful for it. And my wife and I have kind of came to some realizations and, really reviewed how we're spending our time and what our goals are, and just reevaluating some things, and allowed us to, relax a little bit more. And yeah, I feel like it's been a really, positive thing for us and for myself mentally, allowing me to sort of like take it out of fourth gear and bring it down to maybe third, which I've been grateful for. So it's just a reframing of things and an opportunity to slow down, a forced kind of slow down period, which I think I needed. So.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Matt Bruce.
So I don't read books. I never did as a kid. I was the guy who used to go get Spark Notes. I might be dating myself at this point, but Spark Notes were like these little yellow books you can go buy, which were like the basically the outline of what the book was about, so I can take the. If you go onto USA Weightlifting's website, they ask me that question, and my answer is still on there as One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish by Dr. Seuss. I'm a very visual learner. I like learning through actual experiences. But one thing that I did learn through my coach, and I actually got to meet the guy and work with him personally, is the idea of flow by Mihaly, because nobody knows how to say his last name, but it starts with a CS. Oh, look, Lauren's got it. Yep, flow. What that is essentially learning how to get in what they call in the zone or in the moment, and make that a repeatable action so that it can be used in life or in tournament, competition, whatever it may be. So that would be my suggestion for a book, would be Flow, the Psychology of the Optimal Experience. And one thing that I'm grateful for is a couple of things. Being able to be outside and cherish these moments that sometimes I feel so busy, I don't really look outside and enjoy the birds and the scenery and watch neighbors walking around and being so neighborly. Number two is being with my family more. Sometimes you get so overwhelmed with work and you make excuses to not be with family. And now that when I'm forced to be with family, it makes me appreciate them much more.
Perfect. Thank you. Derek.
Well, like Matt, I'm not much of a book reader either. But I can say I've been wanting to read a book for a while, and I've been looking into Make Your Bed, which is by Admiral William McRaven. And basically it's kind of a self-help motivation book that, it's about setting the small goals every day and accomplishing them to hopefully accomplish your bigger goals. And the thing I'm most grateful for right now is kind of along the same lines as everybody else. We've been forced to kind of take a step back. Time has slowed down for just about everybody. My everyday hustle takes me away from home quite a bit. I travel a lot. So being back home, I'm still staying on my same schedule. I set my alarm every day, just like it's a normal day. But it's been nice to kind of reconnect with, my gymnastics background. I'll wake up every morning and do 30 or 40 minutes worth of stretching / meditation. And that's been really nice. And fortunately enough, we've been having excellent weather here in Louisiana. So just about every day I'm at the park, taking a walk or running. The wife and dog will go with me. So it's been really nice to kind of reconnect with myself and just life in general.
Perfect. Thank you. Dr. Sean.
Yeah, my favorite book recently, it depends on the season of my life, but right now my favorite book is Rich Dad Poor Dad. And the reason I like Rich Dad Poor Dad so much is because it speaks to the state of ownership, like your personal responsibility as it pertains to your financial position in life. And that can really be carried out into anything else. It's kind of like Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink with a specific field attached to it. So that's my favorite book. It's one I've been sending to a bunch of people. And the thing that I am most grateful for is that what I have found is this time has shined a massive microscope, laser, whatever you want to call it, on the blind spots that I have in my life and in my business of things that are poorly managed. And I've been able to do things like cut people from my company, add people to my life, cut programs that we were, trying to get going that really never should have tried to get going. And it's been a great time to be like, what is awesome and what needs to be awesome and what needs to be gone. So that's the biggest value I've taken from this.
Perfect. Adrian.
All right. So from a favorite book perspective, mine would have to be a book called Wild at Heart, and it's by an author named John Eldridge. It's I'd suggest it to any male, any female that wants to marry a male, or any person in general that might have a son growing up. Honestly, it's kind of a look inside the male character, and it kind of talks about a little bit about the emasculation of men and where we've gone as a society versus where we used to be, and how to maybe foster that and correct it, or let men be men and kind of teach us how to do so appropriately. But nonetheless, I get a ton of lessons from that. I've read it twice, and there's a lot of great one-liners and quotes, and there's even some scripture references and things like that in there. So it's really cool to go back and read for myself. It speaks to me directly a lot. And then for this time, it's kind of, I'm almost piggybacking off of what Sean shared, is that I'm actually grateful for not all of which, of course, and my empathy goes out to anyone that's suffered severe losses during this time at all, to any degree, but I'm actually grateful for the adversity a little bit. And the reason I say that is because it's brought many things to light, whether it was, my inability to connect with people aside that are outside of like my presence, or, things that are happening with our company at FNX, or even here with Brute Strength, like being able to find new ways to add value, trim the fat per se with the other company at FNX, and things are good and things are going good. But what I think I'm honestly most grateful for was the immediate pivot that it asked us to make, and I think if I could offer anyone perspective too, it's just one thing is like, I've given this to several people when it's come to advice, is like to stop pretending that this is so temporary and pretend what if it was the new normal. Because I think that's one of the best ways to try to live in the present. It kind of has us all with our back to the wall, But like, what if this is what tomorrow was, and the next day and the next day and the next day? Where's your why then, and what are you going to do then? Would you still double down in the gym and train hard, or would you not? Like, because you just want to find that new level of self-performance and self-improvement, or are you just like going to pack it in because no one can watch you exercise, right? Like, there's a lot of blood in the water. This is the way that I speak, because, you know, it's the athletic field. I can't really help it, but there's a lot of blood in the water in life. People are going to come out of this better on the other end that are hungry and motivated, and people are going to come out feeling very woe is me after this. And that goes from the competitive nature of the sport of CrossFit and many other things, but also in life and business. So I'm grateful for the adversity.
Perfect. Thank you. Nick?
Yeah, favorite book. It's a hard one. I think my favorite book is Mastery, for sure. I think there's just, every time I read that, it, you know, I redigest it based on where I am in my life, so it gives me a new perspective, even though it's the same information. I think a book that had the biggest impact on me as a coach was probably The Cortisol Connection. It's a great book. It talks just about the underlying impact of cortisol and life and stress and everything. I think it's huge. So those two I recommend. Yeah, for sure. In terms of what I'm grateful for, yeah, it's in line with what everybody's talking about, right? I think so. Last night, you know, my family, so wife, 2 daughters, like, we spent an hour and a half all cooking a meal together, and then sitting down and eating it. And that hadn't happened in like years, right? Just because we're so busy. And those moments, I'm just finding more and more opportunities to be appreciative of. So like, I know that, you know, backtrack a year ago, and I remember conversations with friends about how I was craving a simpler time, and like the question of like, how do I simplify my life? And, you know, and here it is, right? And obviously the circumstances aren't ideal, but you know, I'm spending more time with my daughters and my family, and things are just simpler. And I think it's in line with what Adrian, you said, is it's allowed me to kind of refocus a little bit of what's important in my life, and I have the time to nurture that. And so it's filling my cup in a way that I just couldn't have imagined like a year ago. So.
Perfect. Thank you. Panelists, if you can stay on the call for just a minute while the attendees jump off, I'll be back with you guys in just a second.
Derek, I wonder if it's a Cajun thing. Do all Cajuns not read?
There's no book in Louisiana.
That's true.
There's no
It probably stems from our awesome education system.
You know, that's probably an excellent point.